So
There we
I've
go.
got my friend Eric Bassett with Natura Pest Control on today. How you doing, man?
I am doing really well. It's super exciting to be back on the show again. I'm stoked.
That's right. This is sort of a part two because we've had you on the show. It's been several months, I believe. And I was just telling you, I
Mhm.
think you were a little surprised maybe, but you have one of the most downloaded episodes that we've had in our podcast since we've started this. And we were joking earlier because I think in the last one, because it was a Zoom too, and we had
Mhm.
you had the cable guy or gas man or something like
Yeah.
walking in the background or
Yeah.
knocking on your door. Is that right?
Oh, it's 100% right. Knocked on the door and was like, "Hey, can I come on in?" And I'm like, "Sure, you might as well since you're already here." It was great.
Man, that's awesome. How you been?
I've been good. I've been busy. Busy with all the right things I like to believe. And I've been co-hosting the Bug Bux podcast with Alan Draper. That's been going really well. And just a lot of opportunities for me to reach out to guys that I want to network with in the pest control space, which is what I really love. We're doing some leadership development within our own company, redefining things, cleaning up some stuff. So it's been a busy season, good season though.
That's awesome. And is so as far as the Bug Bucks podcast, so we've had, of course, you on and Alan on in the past as guests of ours, and I'm a huge fan of the podcast. You guys rock it every week, and I love the fact that you're putting content out, creating value for listeners. I told Alan when he first started his podcast, however long ago it's been, it's about the time I feel like I kind of came into this industry. It was Start and Grow Your Pest
Mhm.
Control Company at the time. It's one of
Yep.
those things where it's like I would just wait for updates to come, like when an episode was about to drop, I'm just like sitting on the edge of my seat, like just waiting for it so I could listen, put my earbuds on, and if I've got kids and my wife in the car, I'm like tuning them out. I'm doing the noise cancellation feature.
Yeah.
So how's that been, man, as far as hosting the podcast? I see you got all your fancy equipment there, and uh,
It's been great, man. The equipment thing was something that kind of came piece by piece. I'm a sucker for kind of diving all into something. So when Alan invited me to be a co-host, I was like, dude, I got to get all the stuff. And so I tested out all this different equipment and what sounded good. And he jabs at me, makes fun of me a couple times when I, forget to have something turn on. He's like, well, dude, as long as you're making the mistakes, like we're good. But Alan's been great. That whole podcast has been awesome. And when you have a podcast like this one or the Bug Bucks podcast, it's tough to stay dedicated. It's every week content, having ideas, things that are new and fresh and things that are relevant to the industry. And, I just think every time I kind of maybe even doubt myself or wonder, what's going on, I always think about what I wish would have been available to me when I started in the pest control industry. I didn't have anything like this available. And it's just amazing that we can kind of give these types of resources to people who are taking their hard-earned money, hard-earned savings, putting it into buying a truck, starting their own pest control company. And now they have resources like this and other podcasts to actually help them weed through the stuff that they otherwise would probably waste a lot of time and money trying to weed through themselves.
It's funny you say that. We had Maria and I were at a Chamber of Commerce roundtable this morning for young professionals that have been in the workforce for, was it Maria, 5 or less years? Is that right?
Five or less, that's me.
Yeah, and Maria being one of
Nice.
them. We actually had 2 or 3 of our team members there at the roundtable this morning, and that was one of the things I talked about was getting started in this industry, or when I was in insurance or real estate. I was the first guy to raise my hand and say, hey, who can I reach out to learn from and pick their brain? And now it's so much easier with podcast and resources. And back then, even, with our insurance business, it was just picking up the phone and calling, like cold calling people almost to see if you could take them to lunch,
Mhm.
or get a 20-minute phone call with them. And so the fact that, you and Alan, ourselves and others that are creating content out there to create value for someone to grow their business with really nothing in return, right? So it's not like you guys are promoting a product or a service, or you're giving back. And And I do feel like you get it back in spades with other, with other things, because you're creating relationships and a network. So what has been the most rewarding or the most impactful episode you feel like that you guys have done, or what topic do you feel like you've gotten really good feedback from, or you personally were just super passionate about?
I was looking at the different episodes that we've done, and the first episode that I had a guest appearance on was like episode 26 or episode 27. And then I just kind of stayed on as a co-host all the way. I think we're up through episode 50 something now.
That's
And so I'm
awesome.
thinking like, man, like we've got all these episodes. And so I kind of lose track of all these different things. But I can kind of remember an overall theme that I feel like been the most fulfilling for me, which is every time we do a podcast episode and we put some information out there, exactly what you said, which is it's not really intended to sell any particular product or service or anything like that. It's just a way that I think me and Alan and you and Maria and others like us want to give back. You feel like, at least I feel like, the more I receive, the more I should give, right? I feel like it makes the world a better place. I feel like it makes pest control a better place. And that idea of helping other PCOs and entrepreneurs understand that it's not a zero-sum game, that topic has been really impactful for me, because it never fails to come full circle where, somebody will come back and they'll say, hey, Eric, I want to talk to you about this thing, or can you help me with this system, this process, help me with inside sales, whatever it is. And I'll end up learning so much more than I ever put out there, just talking to people, different ways that people are doing stuff. And even if I don't necessarily learn anything new, at least it always reinforces whatever it is that I'm doing that might be the right thing, or helps me clarify something. So, putting yourself out there and promoting content or building content or trying to help people, man, just pays dividends in ways that you really just don't expect until after you've already obviously invested a lot of time and effort and money sometimes. But that whole idea that it's not a zero-sum game, that you can help even people within your own market become better, and that kind of elevates everybody. That's the idea that I really think hits home for me.
Dude, I could not agree more. And I've seen you do that and others, not just on the podcast. And, another thing we have not had in years past, look at these Facebook groups. And I use Facebook as an example. That's probably the main one I would think that's out there. It doesn't matter what industry. We talked about this this morning as well. Whether you're an accountant, whether you're in sales, pest control, insurance, real estate, you can find like-minded individuals that are at the top of their game, or trying to develop their game, that are out there sharing. And the podcast is the number one place I think to turn to, but then these Facebook groups. And so you and I are members in a lot of joint Facebook groups. That's one of the reasons I want to reach back out to you and get you back on the show, other than one of the most downloaded episodes, other than the gas man walking in the background, completely distracting you. And you handled it like a champ. So you were very poised under pressure. But the fact that when I see you post on one of these groups, it's such a thoughtful answer a lot of times. And it drives so much value, because you see a lot of junk too on these groups. And I don't mean to say that like in a mean-spirited way. For example, if I want to ask a question of a Facebook group, whatever industry I'm in, for us, pest control, right? Hey, how much should you pay your technicians? Or what's your advice on this? And you can get 100 different responses. And you have to be careful too, in my opinion, to look, the person that's giving you an answer, you almost have to look and see, like, what is their background? What have they accomplished? Where are they in their stage of life? Because they can give you bad advice, or it could be good advice. And so you really have to vet that, maybe the perspective that they're giving. And what I've seen from you in a lot of questions, and number one, the fact that you're taking time to go in and respond to people that have questions, or, where they don't know where to turn, or in that you're giving a thoughtful response, means you're giving back. But I've really been impressed with that. The fact that you do see some yahoos on here sometimes, to just spout out and just have this one, and your one-sided opinion. Yours really seem to be thoughtful. They seem to have some really good perspective. You seem very grounded in your answers and self-awareness. Where do you think that comes from? I mean, how does your mind work in that when you see these different questions that come across?
I think it comes with some experience. My father has been in customer service and sales for a long time. And I used to listen to him talk with customers. I used to go on kind of these errands and sales calls and stuff with him, and I'd just kind of be hanging out in the background. And I'd listen to him talk with customers. And the way that he approached situations was always that, he never acted like he was 100% right or that they were 100% right, but there was always some middle ground somewhere where, what he's doing might not be 100% the best thing for someone else, but he would always provide or try to provide valuable feedback for somebody. And me and my business partner, who's my sister, are really similar in that respect, where we understand some underlying philosophies that we believe to be principles or kind of everlasting truths about business, sales, relationships. And I think it's really important that when somebody asks a question like, hey, how should I pay my technicians? Or, specifics like, should I do a cancellation fee or whatever the situation is? The way that I like to approach it is, hey, this is how we do it. This is why we do it this way. This might not be the way that you want to do it. But if you'd like to do it this way, I can show you some specifics on how to integrate it into your business. I can tell you some pro tips on some things you should do and shouldn't do. And if you like it, great. If you don't like it, I'm not hurt by it.
Right.
It's your business, it's your money, right? It's your time. And, ultimately at the end of the day, I don't want to see somebody struggle with something that I could help them with, but I also don't want to take away an opportunity that they should build something on their own, right? So I think sometimes in these Facebook groups, you see guys that ask very specific questions about something like, hey, can somebody send me a fully done commercial contract that they use? It's like, well, I could send it to you, but I think it might be a better opportunity for me to explain some of the philosophies of what you should put in a commercial agreement. And then you should probably write that on your own, right? It's one of those scenarios where it's like teach a man to fish kind of a thing, but also
Absolutely.
maybe show him what pond he should fish in.
Right.
But not necessarily just keep giving him fish. It's about helping develop and up level these other PCOs. But yeah, just like you said, there could be a lot of people in those Facebook groups who are a little bit harsh on one end of it, where they're like, figure it out for yourself. And some guys who just offer answers without any philosophy. And I try to be pretty balanced. And it might just be my personality, but that's the approach I like to take.
Absolutely. And you've got to look at it through the lens that they're looking through, right? So you've got to know, is someone, the person asking for advice, are they a two-person show and they're trying to get through this phase of their business, where they've been around for 20 years and they've got 50 employees and they're trying to hit this next level? Those could be two totally different scenarios based on their situation. So we have to slow down, and it's almost like they ask you a question, did you have to respond with a question?
Yeah.
Like you asked them, well,
Yep.
let me ask you these 3 or 4 questions first before I can give an hopefully intelligent, response.
Yeah. And there was a gentleman that I've been working with, and we're in the very, very beginnings of some consulting work. And, he told me some key things that he wanted help with. And I'm like, that sounds great. I'd love to help you with these key things. I'm going to send you a discovery checklist. It's what I call it. And it helps me understand the inner workings of his business and his operation, so that whenever I actually provide feedback and provide solutions for his company, they match, because what's tough is he's obviously paying me for my time, and I'm investing my time. And at the end of the day, we want the same thing, which is those solutions to fit quickly and easily and be effective. And I think that discovery checklist, just to get things started, is probably 40, 50 questions. And, it's about, hey, tell me about your business, tell me about your people, tell me about your org chart, tell me about your service offering, tell me about your philosophies on cancellation rate and service agreement, and how often you're, treating customers, and what your service looks like, products you use. And, that might be kind of overwhelming for some people, where they're like, man, why do you got to ask me all these questions? Can't you just give me the
Just give me
answers
the
to
answer.
like, should I do this or shouldn't I do this? And the thing that I say all the time, which my wife drives her crazy, somebody will ask me a question and I'll say, well, it depends, or I'll say yes and no. And she's like, gosh,
You
I
sound just
wish
like
you would stop saying that. you know, because it's so true. Because the last thing you want to do is offer somebody feedback without really fully understanding everything that needs to be understood before you give that answer, right? And in our inside sales program, we have all these different steps when it comes to selling customers. And obviously, first step is acknowledgement, providing validation for a customer situation, building the relationship, providing confidence. And then the whole next step is investigation. So what we call it, where you ask questions about their house, their pest issue, their history, their
Mm.
wants, their interests, their needs, all these things. And from an inside sales perspective, I found that some of the best salesmen, obviously you need to know how to close, but some of the best salesmen are the ones who can effectively ask questions and get information. The more you know about your client, the more you know about your customer, the better that you can actually serve those clients and customers. So it's kind of a long answer to what we were talking about, but getting all the information that you need before you provide feedback, at least the necessary information you need, is such a powerful thing.
That's right. So, for example, if you're trying to hire your first inside salesperson compared to your
Mhm.
20th salesperson, the piece of advice you maybe give to someone probably looks a little bit different. When you're first creating a sales program, it's going to look different, and maybe that candidate
Yep.
that you're hiring compared to the 20th who comes in and they're mentored by 2 or 3 people already in your organization. So
Mhm.
I completely relate to that, and I try to. It's like friends of mine. They're hardcore. Hey, I'm watching Fox News. Other ones, hey, I'm hardcore MSNBC. And I'm like, I want to watch both and understand both and see both sides. And you got to be careful too. I think what's the saying? If you straddle the fence, you'll get a sore crotch. So
Yeah,
I want
the
to take a side.
analysis paralysis.
That's right. But I do
Yep.
think it's important to see both sides, especially when it comes to growing a business, because you've seen it. There's 10 different ways to grow a business. If you get to the same endpoint and it's what worked for you, it can look completely different than the way this guy got to that same point. So
Yep.
I'm with you there. So we had our last episode, we talked about, with Kevin Menard with Ideal Traits. We talked about recruiting. We talked about hiring, screening, getting the right candidates, right? The old saying, get the right people on the bus. Once they're on the bus, get them in the right seat.
Mhm.
And his whole program with Ideal Traits is tailored toward that. We've used it for years with our insurance business. We use it for our pest control. It's amazing. I would like to maybe spend the next few minutes talking about recruiting, talking about the market. Last time we talked about marketing of getting people to make your phone ring to buy your pest control service. And so now let's talk about, how do you find good candidates? What are
Mhm.
ways that you get them in the door? How do you show off your culture? How do you screen them? And then once they're onboarded, how do you get them essentially onboarded, right, into your company?
Mhm.
And then maybe we'll talk a little bit about maybe some compensation plans. I get those questions a lot. How do you compensate your technicians, your salespeople? Is it base, commission, et cetera? So let's start with the
Mhm.
marketing side of, are you guys hiring right now? I mean, what does that look like for your company?
Yes. Yeah. So we are hiring right now, and it always seems like, as soon as as soon as we feel like we don't need to hire somebody, something changes, and all of a sudden we're back in the hiring game again. I almost want to just hire somebody, a professional full-time recruiter, to just have a pool of recruits for me. But yeah, I think there's two different ways that we end up recruiting. And we actually ran some numbers the other day and found out that 90% of our current workforce is referral, or we found via referral. And the big thing with the culture of our company when we first began is we really wanted to provide solid opportunities for friends and family. And so that's kind of where we began, which is, okay, we need this person. Do we know anybody, friends or family, that could fill this position or has the potential to grow into it, right? And we're all pretty good trainers, I'd like to think. And so we can mold people really well as long as they have the attitude, the aptitude, and the accountability for it. And so we started off with that. Obviously, it ended up being a very, very high ratio of referral versus non-referral.
Sure.
For the other side of things, you use, whether it's Indeed, Monster, even Craigslist or other types of platforms for recruiting professionally. Or even if you might even use a professional recruiter. I've talked to a few of them for some high level executive positions. And, the big thing for me is, and I've always kind of been a wordy or like an intentional word driven type person on some of these things, but things like high performing team, high level of accountability, transparency, high ability to excel and move up within the company. Small company feel, big company resources kind of
Mhm.
a vibe, right? Because people want opportunity. People love the feel of genuine, small family-owned companies, but they still want the big company opportunities. And so I love to make sure that people understand that. But more importantly, I want to attract the type of people who understand that high level of accountability is what drives high performance. And high performance and high expectations are the way that we provide additional opportunities for our employees. So it's kind of that circle that feeds itself, right? And I want someone to read a listing and look at those words, those phrases, and think, oh yeah, that's where I want to be, right? Like I need to get an interview with these people. And then when we talk to our frontline colleagues or whoever it is about talking to their friends and family, it's the same type of philosophies. Like, hey, when you bring us a referral, we're trusting that you've kind of pre-vetted this person. You've told them about our high level of accountability, performance, high expectations. And we're a very forgiving and friendly vibe and atmosphere, but that doesn't mean that we don't have high expectations.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, we run both of those things pretty concurrently. I do allow my frontline managers to kind of recruit on their own, and kind of have that be their responsibility so that they can fill the resources they need for their departments. And then most of the time, the ownership team, we only step in when those managers need it. When they ask for help, ask for assistance, ask for extra resources, time, we'll help do interviews. And then we always usually step in on secondary and tertiary interviews if that ends up being the thing.
Sure. So what is the makeup of your company now? I mean, how many team members do you have within your company?
So our ownership team is 4. And then we split our operations into 2 high level managers. And not necessarily, I mean, I like to believe that their titles fit, but
Yeah.
our office manager is over our office, customer relations, customer care, technician support, and inside sales, collections, all of the office administrative responsibilities. And then we have a service manager who is over technicians, over product, over vehicle maintenance,
Mm,
over equipment, all of the hands-on side of the
field
business.
operations.
He's,
Yeah.
yep, exactly. Field operations, all that stuff. And then the 2 of them work concurrently on um, things that require two eyes on. So there's a lot of logistical things when we're checking technician placement, routing. Obviously the staffing for the technicians is something that's going to come from the service manager, whereas the logistics of who needs to be where comes from the office manager. So those 2 have to work kind of concurrently on some things. And then our office manager has an assistant manager. And then we have an additional staff below her that is kind of our what I would call frontline colleagues for the office and inside sales. And then on the service side of things, it's a little bit different. We have the service manager, assistant service manager, and then we have fire team leaders or team leaders. And then you've got about 3 to 4 technicians below each one of those team leaders. And it's our chain of command that we use to ensure that everybody gets developments weekly. Everybody has somebody that they can speak to. So if you have a question, you can go to your FTL, and then it goes up the chain to the assistant service manager, and then the service manager, and then an owner if need be, if for any reason you can't get a hold of those guys.
Wow, it seems like quite an organizational chart, man. I mean, I'm sure it didn't start out, especially with four owners, right? I assume you guys were in the trenches as the doers, and as you've grown, you've been able to delegate and build that out into team leader positions. How
Mhm.
how have you guys handled the recruiting and screening process as far as um, it sounds like you get a lot of referrals. You said 90%. We did the
Mhm.
exact same exercise with our leadership team. We're probably right there, 95% as well. And that's,
Mhm.
I would say we were spending 90% of our time going through resumes and stuff, managing it through emails before ideal traits to, we're only getting 10% of our hires from that process, but we were spending so much time.
Mhm.
You guys use like a logistical process or, a screening process? Is it like a phone interview and then an in-person or a ride along, or how do you guys do that to make sure you get a mutual fit on board with you from day one?
So depending on the department, so for example, when our service manager does an interview, usually it's over the phone first, and he'll spend about 45 minutes asking some preliminary questions. Then if that goes well, it's usually an in-person interview, and at that point, we might have somebody on the ownership team sit in on that interview to kind of help have eyes on, two ears on that scenario. That way they can kind of discuss after the fact, hey, what did you think? This is the vibe that I got. This answer I liked, this answer I was concerned about. And then usually the third interview that comes in usually is either to clarify some things and to offer a position. We'll know pretty quickly by the second interview, and the questions or the content of the interview, kind of the screening process. What I like to follow is, I think I might have said it before, attitude, aptitude, and accountability. Right off the bat and through a series of questions, tell me about how you set goals. Tell me about a situation where you set a goal, you achieved it. What did you use? What were the resources you required? A lot of open-ended questions.
Mhm.
But the attitude portion of it is all about whether this person sees opportunities, whether they see obstacles, and how they handle the philosophies of those things. Am I going to deal with somebody who, when I offer them, some hard work, they're going to see that as, oh man, why me? Why do I have to deal with this stuff? Or do they see that as, wow, here's my opportunity. I'm getting offered some extra stuff. They must really count on me, right? I'm going to take advantage of this. Um, the aptitude part of that has to do with how much experience they have already and how much experience I feel like they can gain and what potential they have to move through and up within the business. I like to believe that we're always hiring for those high level positions.
Sure.
Sometimes people don't exactly want that, and that's okay. But if that's the case, I want to make sure that it's because, they feel that they can do a particular job very, very well. Not necessarily because of their flaws or because of other issues, they just couldn't move up, right? So aptitude's kind of that next one. And then the last one is going to be accountability. Can I trust this person to do what they say and say what they do? I'm putting my name on their t-shirt. They're riding in my truck with my logo. Every single customer that they talk to, they're representative of me and my business. Can I trust that when situations get tough, the dicey stuff, not just the easy things, but the dicey stuff, are they going to do the right thing and make the right call? And everybody makes mistakes. But when it comes to integrity,
Sure.
um, that's that's a mistake that's usually very costly as far as reputation goes.
For sure.
So, if I talk to my service manager, he has an interview and he focuses on these three things, and he usually gets a pretty good vibe where he'll come into the office and say, hey, I really like this guy. Here are the reasons why I like him. Here are the questions that I asked. Here's some of the answers he gave that were really impactful for me and I think will be a really good fit. And then he'll say, here are some reasons why I think he might not be, or it
Mm.
could be an issue. And that could be logistical. It could be philosophical, personality, work schedule, pay, possibly. I feel like we pay pretty well, but we'll kind of get into that later. But then it kind of gives us a chance to really dive into some of the nitty gritty stuff in that secondary interview. And sometimes that secondary interview is 10 minutes. It's quick extra questions. And we say, hey, we'd love to extend this offer to you. Here are the details. We'd love to have you start as soon as possible. If you need 2 weeks to give 2 weeks notice to your other employer, we'd actually recommend that.
Sure.
That way you leave on good terms. And rarely do we need to do a third interview, but sometimes we do, just to see. And then after that, usually the ride-alongs, I'd say usually the ride-alongs come after an offer for employment. Sometimes it happens before,
Right.
But in most cases, I mean, it's pest control. I think they kind of know what they're getting into. we have, we have interviewed a couple of guys where they're like, I don't really like crawl spaces and I'm kind of scared of spiders and I don't know if I'm really into that thing, but like, I'm willing to try. And we're like, oh,
Yeah, you're like,
we could make this work, but it just kind of depends, and sometimes you have that gut instinct, but I really like to take that gut instinct and then formulate a way that you can logically work through it.
sure. No
I
doubt.
have a question, just on something you said earlier. You said
Mhm.
always be hiring. Do you feel like that mantra maybe helps with your retention as far as retaining your current staff, or maybe with like complacency? Like if I knew you were constantly looking to maybe fill the position that I'm in, I feel like I'm like, all right, I want to keep this. I love the team, I love the culture. Do you feel like it has a negative effect on your current staff, or they kind of keep up with that? Like I know I gotta do the best today and every other day, or someone else might come along and take that from me.
I think, and it's a great question. And I think that some companies, you hear a lot of stuff these days where it's like, hey, instead of providing those new hire incentives, you should provide retention-based incentives for existing employees and all this stuff. And what's interesting is that through our drive to find new employees, we're always learning what new employees are wanting, things that they value, whether it's benefits financially, emotionally, new things that you might not expect as an employer. Because, when you're a business owner and you've been a business owner for 10 years, you kind of lose track of what it is kind of like to work as a W-2 based employee and,
Sure,
kind of going from different place to different place. And so when we're looking for new employees and we're kind of doing a little bit of market research and we're asking ourselves, okay, what are people looking into? And we'll look at other job listings from other employees and other employers. And then we usually use those things. If we're going to offer them to a new employee, we'll actually roll that stuff through our existing team first. So if we're ever going to provide any kind of a benefit, it goes through our existing team first, and then it goes to our new employees. That way our existing team understands, hey, a lot of the benefits that you guys are actually getting, the new benefits that you receive, are because we're looking for new employees, right? And so it doesn't just feed those positions that we need to be filled, but it also feeds the benefits for existing employees as well. So I think they actually have learned to like it. They know when we're looking for new people, they're like, okay, cool. Like this means that we're going to get some new benefits too.
That's awesome.
Well, too, and I think having a development plan or a path for your existing employees, and of course, when you're hiring new ones as well, right? So you can show them you're not just coming to start here and just this is the cap of your existence with our company. Like there is a plan should you choose or want to progress upwards. And look, not everybody does. Some, a lot of our team members, they get hired in a certain role and they love it. They want to be there the rest of their life. That's their, but for those that won't change, like I'm a person of change. I mean, I can't just stand here. I've got to be over here, then here, then here, so I would get very stagnant, maybe being in one role. And we talked again, I know I keep referencing this morning, Maria, but we had Alexa, who's one of our top sales producers for our insurance business, who she was killing it. She was at the top of her game. She finished 2020, I believe, top, 10 or 11 out of 20,000 sales producers for Allstate Insurance. I mean,
Wow.
she's young. She's killing it. ideal. And there was something inside of her that, she wanted something different, something more, something, that we were unable to offer probably, within our organization. And so she pursued real estate, and now she's killing it with that. Right. And so
Mhm.
it makes you really think as an employer, how can we try to have a place that people can develop within our organization? You don't want to lose somebody because you just have this box that they have to fit in, right? Now, sometimes there's only the
Mhm.
box. I get it, but I know we've worked hard on that as far as providing advancement opportunities. And you think of advancement in some big company or corporation, but there's no reason we can't do it as a small business, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so with that, let me roll into incentives for your team members. We put
Mhm.
in some incentives and even awards and trip recognition levels for our team members at all places within our company this year. And again, July we hit 2 years, so this was new for us. But how have you guys used incentives, bonuses, awards, recognition within your company, or is that something you even do?
We do. Yeah. And one of the things is that we do have a really solid development program and process that we use to kind of get performance. And then we use those incentives to act as mm, just a little bit of an extra push, where it's like, hey, this is kind of built into your compensation plan. We want you to be successful. We want you to be able to take advantage of this additional financial opportunity. So let me help you get to the level of performance so that you can get that, right? I want that for you. Everybody wants you to be successful here. And the important thing with incentives for us, and I always kind of let people know when they're doing comp plans or incentive plans, is you want the performance that you're driving to align with what owners want. So, if I want a certain thing, like if I want better retention for my existing clients, that's kind of my view that I'm going to go through. Now, I don't just want my customer service team to just save accounts. If I say, hey, here's an incentive to save customers, just go ahead
Right.
and save more people. I mean, that's really shallow. It doesn't really provide a whole lot of direction, but if I say, hey, what I want us to focus on is when a customer calls in and they're upset, I want us to spend the first however long of that phone call purely in the acknowledgement validation section. I want you to
Mhm.
really make them feel like what they're saying is heard and felt, and that you get where they're coming from before you even begin to, dive into all the questions
Right.
and even try to fix anything, just really try to do that. And by doing those things, I believe that we're going to get better relationships with our customers. We'll be able to push our retention to the next level. And within this level of retention, we're going to offer these types of incentives. So it's the thought process that if you're trying to, give somebody a carrot for doing some kind of a performance, you have to make sure that you've got the infrastructure and the development plan to really back it up. That way they understand how to do it. Because if I tell somebody, hey, I'll pay you this extra money for this thing, go do it. Um, but I don't give them the resources and the
Sure, yeah.
information to be able to execute on that, then it's kind of hollow.
No doubt. So you mentioned retention.
Mhm.
You've had a really robust inside sales program. What are some ways that you've set up? Again, these are questions I know we've gotten, from friends or people that have reached out to us through the podcast. Hey, how do you structure your salespeople? And again, what's
Mhm.
my answer? It depends, right?
It depends. Yeah.
So, my question was, is it inside sales? Is it outside sales? Is it an entry level? Is it
Yeah.
commercial? Is it residential? What does it look like, right? But for your inside sales
Yes.
team, I assume you guys do a base compensation plan,
Mhm.
and commission and bonus structure. How does that typically look for your guys, and where have you seen your most return as far as incentive plans with your people to help them, stay in line and in focus with what the company objectives are?
Yeah. So I'll give you kind of two different examples. With our inside sales team, we offer a higher base pay, and then we don't offer any commissions on specific accounts. Instead, what we do is offer weekly and monthly bonuses for certain tiers of performance within their own personal metrics.
Mhm.
So for example, if you are the top closer, you have the highest contract value, you have the highest retention, you have the best initial value, right? All of those metrics that show us as a company that we are selling quality accounts and that
Mhm.
we can balance those things. I also have it's kind of an overarching score that I call the lead factor score, that shows me how much money is generated per lead that an individual salesperson touches. Not that they close it or not, but just every lead that they touch, how much revenue is generated. And the easy way to do that is you just divide their sales revenue by the number of leads they take.
Right.
And there you got the number. I have a predictive formula to get the same number that's kind of complicated, but the nice thing is that it allows me to see out of all my salespeople who is the most balanced and who is actually generating the most revenue per lead they touch. And I want to make sure that they have an opportunity to handle as many leads as possible.
Sure.
But we offer incentives for that too. So I try to be as transparent as possible when I tell them, these are the metrics that I see value in as an owner. You know, I want to close leads. I want to convert leads to recurring business. I want to have healthy contract values, not too high, definitely not too low, but in a healthy range. I want to have auto bill pay. You know, all these things apply. And the reason why we decided to do weekly and monthly bonuses for those metrics instead of standard commissions, I found that when you do commissions per account, the sales staff become torn when it comes to helping each other close each other's stuff. You know, so if a customer calls in and it's somebody else's lead that was handled, you know, you're like, oh, do I send it to them or do I close it for them? But if I did the work, should I get the commission? And there's a lot of different questions here and there. And not to say that that's necessarily a bad format. There are ways to figure that out. And I do help some other pest control operators do it. But with our company specifically, we found that we have a much better cooperative vibe in our office when we let them be incentivized and bonused out based on their own personal metrics. And then that leaves them open to help each other out with the individual accounts if they need to. That way, each customer, no matter who they talk to, get a very consistent experience across the board.
That's interesting. I have not thought about it, through that lens. I know we've done team bonuses before based on how the whole team does, which can be hairy too, like who's contributing more, is it lopsided, is there a balance there? But at the end of the day, right, the company has to win, and there's no individual, if one individual is winning, everybody else is losing and the company's losing. I mean, it's not a win, right? So that's an interesting way of looking at it. What about your as far as your team out in the field? I mean, what are some ways that you guys incentivize and maybe motivate behavior in the field?
You know, so we've looked at a couple of different pay plans and we've worked through different plans to both compensate and provide commission opportunities for technicians. We've done production-based pay, which is obviously just a percentage of each service that's been done. And we've done hourly-based pay. And we found that in order to kind of retain operational control of what we want done and who we're sending where, it benefits us to offer a really good, strong base hourly rate, with an opportunity for them to get commission if they go out and they sell accounts or upsell customers or get reviews or these other individual things that they can actually control. That way, we don't have to worry about the drive time. We don't have to worry about what type of service we're sending a technician to, whether it's a reservice that has a zero production value or a bed bug service that has a very high production value. And our technicians don't go to the same routes all the time. So our technicians one day might be in the northern part of our service area, and then the next day he might be in the very southern part of our service area. We try to route them based on where they live. They take their vans home. So what's convenient for them is convenient for us. And that allows us to send them to any service we want. So there's no competing philosophy there. Whereas with a production-based pay, sometimes there is. You know, you can give a guy a route that has, maybe a little bit heavy on reservices that have a $0 production value. And all of a sudden that guy has feelings about it. How am I going to make this up? Will I like I'm doing all this stuff for free.
Right,
And
right.
especially if another guy did the service previously, like, am I paying for his mistakes? And
Right.
we want to eliminate any chance of them having any kind of feeling about what they're doing, where they're doing it, and who they're making it up for.
Makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. I like the way you've aligned that again with the results of what you're trying to get for the company, right? And it's, again, there's your diplomatic side, Eric. It's looking back through the lens of the person. I never thought of it that way. They're fixing someone else. They're there on a zero production value, fixing someone else, someone else's mistake. So
Yep.
it makes sense, man. Well, look, I know we're coming up on our time here. I do want to ask one more question. I can't remember if I asked this last time, and I tried to with a lot of guests that we have. I like this question. So, knowing what you know now, what would you do different in your business from the beginning? Because this part of this podcast is following us from when we started with nothing from the beginning, right, to where we are now. The whole 2.5 years under our belt. We're like veterans now, but like, what would you do different? Number one, how long have you been in, how long has your company been around? So it gives the audience some perspective. And then what would you do different today, going back?
So this upcoming year, 2023 will mark 15 years in the pest control industry for me. And marked year 5 as an owner. And then our business has been around for 10 years. So we're coming up on our 10th year. So we're super excited about that. And things that I would do differently. I mean, I look back on all sorts of stuff and just think, man, if I would have known that, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever. One of the things that I would do, and I mean to do, is I would put much stronger emphasis on employee development, and long-term vision, and aligning what owners' goals are with whatever employee goals are. Because, I think in the beginning, when you're a business owner, you think, oh, well, they want a job. I want someone who's going to work for me, and boom, it's a marriage, right? And then later on, you realize that if that's really the philosophy that you're going for, they're going to go wherever they feel is the best job, quote unquote, right? But if I can provide them with a vision, and I can say, hey, here's my vision, here's my dream, this is really what I want this pest control company to be and to provide for myself, my family, and my employees and their families. And then I ask, what's your vision? What's your dream? What do you want to provide for your family? And then they can tell me, and I can say, I think that we can work together where we can both win, and I can give you exactly what you're looking for, and you can help me get what I'm looking for, right? And if we can make a marriage on that kind of a level, on that kind of a platform, you have somebody where you're doing business with people who believe what you believe in. That's a Simon Sinek quote. And you have somebody who will stick with you through thick and thin, because it's more than just a job. It's more than just a paycheck. It's them tying themselves to what their dreams are and working with you to make sure that happens. So employee development, all those things kind of come into play where that kind of rolls into one. But that's really what I would focus on, is in the beginning, it's so tempting just to hire people who need a job. So tempting. You're like, man, I need someone to work. You want a job? Come in here. Doesn't matter, as long as someone can do services, take phone calls, whatever it is. It's so tempting. But I really would force myself to align our visions and our passions a lot more than I did in the beginning.
That is very well said. And Maria, maybe give some quick feedback on that. You coming into our organization over the last few years. I mean, you're probably seeing things a lot differently than maybe someone I hired 10 years ago. Hopefully it's a better experience, because I feel like I've hopefully grown a little bit over the last 10 years, but I've been in that same situation where you're just trying to survive. You're trying to get people on board just to keep up. But Maria, what's been your perspective on that, maybe coming into the workforce the last few years?
Yeah, so this is my first long-term job right out of college. Like Rusty said this morning, we had this little roundtable talk with the chamber about I'm really fresh, I would say, relatively, in the workforce, and something that I've enjoyed gaining from this experience is also seeing, like, what is it like, seeing the opportunity for me to tell you what my opinion is. Like, I think that's something that's very rewarding, and I never see that. I have my friends, not going to name them, but they're frustrated in their jobs because you kind of gain this different perspective from someone coming fresh in. So Eric, you mentioned earlier, incentives, or maybe what do they want to get out of this job. I know, for example, like mental health is very important now, maybe before COVID, and then everyone kind of lost their mind a little bit, but maybe
Yeah.
Incentivizing a gym membership, or you're incentivizing, I'll pay for your therapy, whatever it is. And so I think just having the opportunity to move the ball forward, and it seems like you have that, both ends of it going for you. And I think that's also with like interviews too. I feel like you're going to interview me, and then if I'm going into an interview and you're not asking me, like, well, I'm going to say, what can you do for me? And it's kind of a scary question to ask, but that's been just the most rewarding, is having a voice. And that comes from all of your departments. You have your inside sales, outside sales, your service pros. Everyone, needs to have a voice. And I think that's where the culture comes from. And that's where a lot of failing businesses, you ask them, or you wonder what went wrong, and you talk about retention. Well, you didn't let me speak my mind, and I didn't feel like I could come to you. So now I'm out, and I'm going to find someone else, but I guess that's my long-winded answer.
That's good. That's
Well,
good.
and
I think that's probably what you're alluding to, Eric. So it's taken time to develop people, and again, look at what their goals are, and do they align with the company goals? Because that doesn't make them a bad person if they don't, but that's probably not somebody you want on your team, nor do you want to bring them on your team if there's not going to be alignment from day one, and you're square peg round holing. And again, going back to the whole screening and recruiting process, is we owe it to our team members during the interview process to make sure that they're a fit for us just as much as we're a fit for them. Wouldn't you agree?
Yep. Yeah, I agree 100%. And, to give you and Maria some credit here, I follow Maria on Instagram and Facebook a little bit, and I see her posting things about your podcast, about your business, about opportunities that you guys have. And I can tell from the way that Maria lives her life that she's bought into your business, that she's bought into your vision. And she's passionate about it. And I really feel like the reason why employees are passionate is because they're bought in, right? And the only reason that they have buy-in is when they feel like their voice is heard, when they feel like their ideas are valued, when they feel like their passions and their vision is valued, and things align. And when you find that alignment, the work is still work, business is still business, right? But it's a little bit less tedious, and it's a lot more fulfilling on both ends of the spectrum when that alignment happens. And between the two of you, I just feel like you guys have that, and that's kind of that. People ask me all the time, like, what's the it factor for pest control companies? What's the it factor for success? And I really do feel like when you are able to align your wants and your vision with the wants and visions of your employees, that's when things start to really work, and the magic happens. So hats off to you guys and this podcast and this whole platform, because I really feel like you guys have that.
Man, thank you.
Yeah.
We appreciate you saying that. We appreciate you being on today. I know you're busy. You just got back in from being out of town. You've got the nice tan going on because you've been in Cabo.
Thanks.
But man, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for all you do. We'll continue to listen to you on Bug Bux with Alan Draper. And again, guys listening, whether you're in this industry or not, I definitely, encourage you to reach out, follow this guy right here, because he's got it going on. He's got a really good perspective. And again, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great.
All right, buddy. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Talk soon.